John Wayne was in more than 70 films throughout his career. He nurtured a tough, all-American persona that made him a Western icon. He was as devoted to protecting his friends and country as he was speaking out against his enemies. Keep watching to learn who John Wayne truly hated more than anyone. James Arness. John Wayne was a part of a conservative circle of Hollywood elites who favored blacklisting communists and Democrats. James Arness was part of that circle, but they later had a major falling out. John and James worked on films together in the 50s, including Big Jim McLean, Hondo, Island in the Sky, and The Sea Chase. They became so close, they began to start trying to help each other's careers. The Duke got James a role in the Western Gun the Man Down, made at his own Batjack production company. He also recommended him as the lead in the famous TV show Gunsmoke and introduced him in the first episode's prologue in 1955. U.S. Marshal Matt Dillon went on to be James's most well-known role and lasted 20 years. His relationship with John soured when it was time to return the favor. The Duke had a passion project he'd been working on for 15 years. It was a big-budget film about the Battle of the Alamo, with him in the small role of Sam Houston. He had already invested $1.5 million of his own money into it. He had to take out second mortgages on his homes and use his car as collateral for loans to finance it. John still needed $12 million to complete the movie. Republic Pictures would only give him $3 million, unless he'd star as Davy Crockett. He feuded with them and left to found his own production studio. John then called James and told him the part of Sam in his film was open. The actor didn't have the same level of success as his friend and hadn't been in a film since their former collaboration, Gun the Man Down, in 1956. They scheduled an interview, but it didn't go the way either of them hoped. James never showed up, and John allegedly never forgave him for the snub. He cast Richard Boone in the part of Sam instead, and James Arness never made another cinematic film. Clark Gable. John's trouble with Clark Gable began with another member of his inner circle, John Ford. He was notorious for his temper and tendency to belittle his actors, and it eventually led to a battle. In 1953, he directed Clark, along with Ava Gardner and Grace Kelly, in Mogambo. He made comments about Clark's age and appearance, and his treatment of Ava was enough to make him walk off at one point. John ignored her cries for help during a scene where she was pushed into a mud pool and forced the crew to keep shooting. John Wayne felt a call to come support his friend John Ford because any slights to his inner circle were not tolerated. He and Clark were now on opposite sides. Rude comments were flung on each side. The Duke said Clark was only an actor because it was the only thing he's smart enough to do, saying he was handsome but an idiot. They also had opposite views on acting. John considered himself more of a reactor than a true thespian like Clark. That led to plenty of clashes on the set of Mogambo and a fiery feud that never cooled. Gene Hackman. Gene was another major name who felt the Duke's wrath. It was more a personal opinion than a political disagreement or defensive maneuver, but it still left a permanent stain on their relationship. In 1948, John and Gene starred together in Fort Apache. It was later considered one of the 10 greatest westerns ever made. It was also one of the first to show Native Americans sympathetically, which anti-Indian John surprisingly didn't have an issue with. He led the film, but he thought his co-stars were overrated. His daughter Aissa details what he thought of Gene Hackman in her book, John Wayne, My Father. She said he was one of the only other stars she heard her father speak about with any real venom. They couldn't appear together without the Duke criticizing his performance, calling him, quote, the worst actor in town. The Academy disagreed with John Wayne, giving Gene 2 Academy Awards and 3 Oscar nominations. Aissa is still unsure why he held this opinion, but speculates it could have had to do with his friend John Ford. Perhaps the volatile director had made another enemy, and John was stepping in to help again. She also believes her father's opinion of Gene could have changed if they had spent more time together. Clint Eastwood. On the surface, John Wayne and Clint Eastwood had more in common than they had different. They were both instantly recognizable Western superstars with fruitful careers. Unfortunately, their similarities weren't enough to keep them from feuding and eventually refusing to work together. John was known for turning down roles if he didn't agree with the film's message. He called Western High Noon, quote, the most un-American thing I've seen in my life, and Steven Spielberg's Draft Dodger, un-American drivel. And one of his only regrets about his career was not not taking Dirty Harry before Clint could get it. It was one part they both would have enjoyed taking, but it was one of the only ones. Clint directed his second film, High Plains Drifter, in 1973. It was a hit and a critical darling, but as he said in his book, Ride Boldly Ride, The Evolution of the American Western, John Wayne was not a fan. He felt it wasn't true to the spirit of the American West. Clint attempted to bury the hatchet and offered him a part in one of his later movies, The Hostiles. He tried multiple times until John sent a brutal letter explaining all of his problems with it. His opinion of High Plains Drifter was still in his mind and he couldn't get over it to work with Clint again. In the end, it was artistic differences that kept them apart. They had a conflicting view of what a cowboy film should be. Frank Sinatra. John Wayne was a man who held closely to his ideals, so if he hated a man or woman, he likely stuck to that feeling for his entire life. One of the only exceptions was Frank Sinatra. They differed in so many ways, from personas to political views. They even reportedly clashed more than once, but they stayed friends in the end. An early feud. Frank was liberal enough at one point in his life to be tracked by the FBI for over 41 years. He openly supported anti-racist, anti-fascist, and international causes. He was even a member of the Independent Citizens Committee of the Arts, or ICCASP. Its other influential members included Duke Ellington, Albert Einstein, and Eleanor Roosevelt. John remained a staunch conservative his entire life. He belonged to a right-wing anti-communist group called the John Birch Society. He also supported an entity that landed on the other end of the spectrum than the one Frank worked with. The House Un-American Activities Committee watched for communists and kept watch over Frank. Politics made its way into their filmmaking. Frank hired Alfred Maltz, who was on the communist blacklist, to write the screenplay for The Execution of Private Slovik. John responded in interviews about the collaboration that the press should ask Frank's crony, John F. Kennedy, what he thought about it. Maltz was eventually fired due to public outcry. When Frank and John appeared at the same Hollywood benefit, Frank reportedly stalked off stage when his former friend took the mic, and their discussion later was heated. Reported altercations. It's unclear whether the two men ever got physical. Certain reports claim they fought after the awkward benefit, but John denied it. There was also an alleged event in Las Vegas in the 60s. John was staying in a hotel near the film he was working on, and Frank was right above him having a party. The noise was so loud, he went up to Frank's room and asked to quiet it down. That only lasted a few moments. He called again, but no one answered. The story says John went and banged on Frank's doors. He demanded they turn down the noise or else. A bodyguard came saying that, quote, no one speaks to Mr. Sinatra that way. John allegedly went to leave, but then backhanded the bodyguard and the noise stopped. A repaired friendship. Despite their early fights and opposing views, the two stars eventually repaired their friendship. It was a strange but beautiful change. Now it's time to hear from you. Are you a John Wayne fan? Let us know in the comments section below.